Hello.
Oh man. Hey,
What's up? Welcome.
thank you. Thank you for having me, man. This is cool.
Yeah, I just want to say at this point in time, you have probably the best. Well, Reed also had a pretty nice camera, but yours is just looking crisp. You got the perfect lighting setup, the perfect. I don't know. Like I'm just super impressed. I'm glad to see it. So, uh, yeah, hopefully it's gonna be a fun time for you. I just started this podcast, and I think I guess, mission statement, if you will, is to just talk to interesting people about interesting things.
Well, I'm interested, that's for sure. It's awesome to be here. It's funny how I was actually just talking to Daphne on the way over here. I think the last time that we've really talked was like we got sushi right before you got out and moved away, and that was the last time we had like a real conversation. And so here we are a couple years later, and we're doing it on your YouTube channel, which is pretty cool.
And a lot of stuff has happened because we both did the transition out of the military, got our
hmm
post-military jobs, and all that stuff. So I guess, can you tell me about your journey? So what have you been doing? What have you been up to since you
Yeah,
got
so
out?
as you know, when I first got out, I stayed local to Camp Lejeune as a contractor supporting all the end user applications and services on that DoD network that was hosted there. And I mean that was an interesting job. As somebody who came into IT through the military, having really no experience with it beforehand, learning a lot while I was in the military, and then being able to make my career move post military in that direction was very fortunate because a lot of people, when they separate, they don't exactly know what to do. And I had a transition that just fell into my lap because of my job. So I was very end user focused at that position. And then since then, I've moved into a more focused role as a network engineer, which also is really interesting and speaks to the adaptability and I guess just the ability to pick things up on the fly because I'm not a traditionally trained network engineer. I'm working with people who have done this since the the conception of these, of Cisco devices. So it's really cool to have been able to adapt into a position where I'm working with guys who've done this really since networking was a thing, and be competitive in the field. So it's that's been my journey. End user support into a network engineer, full blown network engineer, and now I'm working completely from my house as a network engineer with Verizon, which is really cool.
Verizon. Wow, I had no idea. I assumed for whatever reason you're still working with base stuff, like on base
No,
type of
so
stuff. When did this Verizon
no,
shift happen?
yeah, so this is actually pretty recent. We my wife and I, Daphne, we relocated right after our daughter was born. So she was born in March of 22, and we just relocated back to Pennsylvania, where we're from, in June of 22. So the position that got us relocated was actually supporting a hospital during a big network migration that they were doing, and I decided to pursue a full remote job, and I interviewed for a position with a Verizon. Verizon's a subcontractor actually to the post office, to the USPS, for a public to private network space migration. And I interviewed and I landed the role, and that's what I'm doing now. So I'm a network engineer that works in my basement, which I
That's
never saw that coming.
well, that's sweet. Of course, you got the job. For context for any viewers out there, you're probably one of the most competent people that I've ever met in the Marine Corps by far.
I'm just really good at Googling. That's all.
Have you been, very curious in your particular line of work? Have you been using like ChatGPT at all to with any of your inquiries?
So it's actually funny that you said that. Our mutual friend Mark is the one that introduced me to this Chat GPT, and he sent it to me. He was all proud of it. He told me it was a project that he had been working on. Like he tried to make it sound like I think he had some play in it, just being
What an
Mark,
asshole.
or at least that's how I interpreted it. But
Right.
well, I guess in a sense, well, I guess not. Never mind. I was gonna say that we all kind of do play a part in it, but this I think they closed off input like a couple years ago. Is that correct?
Well, the training data like goes up until 2021, but there is user feedback that they're implementing.
Okay.
But that's a good question whether or not they are implementing into the scope now or like the release that's going to
Right.
come out for the paid version.
Right. But so to answer your question, I haven't used it, but I do know people who are like writing automation scripts to do certain things that have asked it at least questions. And from the purposes that they used it for, it was pretty incredible how well it did what they asked. And I have other people who have like put it through some weird testing where they ask it to write, we'll just say write a sermon of this part of the Bible as if JFK wrote it, and then it would use like his types of linguistics, the way that he spoke, the way that he would order things, and then use it to write a sermon of a specific parable from the Bible or whatever. So it's incredibly adaptive and it's super cool, but it's also like kind of frightening in a sense. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that all of the above, to be honest. I introduced it to Mark. So when this thing came out, that I think it was like December 5th of 22.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I think I saw like on Twitter or something, people like writing stuff like you said, like just weird ass prompts that like just like were kind of fun, playful, but it was also just incredible the way that it answered it. And then I was like, okay, well, I got to figure this out. And so I got on it and I had like an existential crisis almost. I was just like, what can you use this thing for? Like, and I was just like going through my mind. I was like, okay, so in the beginning, you can just, have fun with it and use text based stuff to, write out emails, do fantastic things. But it's like, what happens when you connect it to like Excel, to PowerPoint, to Visual Studio so you can write code? And not only can you say, hey, write me a C sharp, um, uh, C sharp line of code to connect me to a SQL database. If it has access to your like, to your, I guess computer, I don't even know, like command prompt or whatever, it could just do that stuff for you. So instead of saying, hey, give me a template, you say, create a template in Excel, writing,
Mm-hmm.
and use my document from last
Right.
year to populate it, blah, blah, blah. So I think the limits to this thing is just up to the creativity of whoever's using it, which is kind of insane, especially for people who have arbitrary thoughts and ideas that they can't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
pinpoint or create something with. They're just kind of floating around, and this thing kind of uh, lets the rubber meet the road with some people.
Right. I mean, it does. It still requires to be prompted at the moment, right? Like it can't just do. You have to ask it to do something. So I think it's still fairly limited in that capacity, right? It can't just make decisions and uh, act on. I mean, it's not emotion. It can't just act. It's all in response to input from
Yeah,
us humans at the moment. So I think we're we're safe there. I do believe I think that there was in the AI space there's a chess robot that had solved the problem differently after so many times of being faced with the same problem. And then that was and I can't quote the experiment, the robot, the situation, but the basis of it was that they made this robot face the same sequence X amount of times. It's probably, maybe hundreds of thousands, millions of times. I don't know, but at some point it changed the way that it did it. Dude, I don't know. It's
Interesting.
kind of terrifying how close we might be to, these symbiotic like robots that are interfacing with human intelligence,
Yeah,
in a new
it's
way. It's crazy.
creepy. It's creepy. It's amazing. It is what it is. And this is like the very very tip of the iceberg. Like, so I work at Microsoft, and obviously we've purchased, like, not obviously, but we've purchased like half of OpenAI, which is a company that created
Hmm.
ChatGPT, and we are integrating it now. So like my thoughts and feelings of like the Excel, PowerPoint, like we're doing that. So we're integrating Chat GPT capabilities into all our products, every single one. And I specifically work in business applications. So my organizations sells product like software to businesses to run their businesses more efficiently. So whether it's like
Hmm.
customer service or like low code solutions to create websites or financial stuff, we're integrating this thing into it. So now it's going to be just absolutely insane. It's like there's a lot of technical stuff that you get, and you need like a solution architect to come in and do the implementation. Like, hey, this is, you got to set up all these settings, blah blah blah. Well, now with this kind of capability, you'll probably just be able to, hey, I have a business to business company. We sell XYZ. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. What's the best way to do this?
Right.
And it's gonna be like, here you go, buddy. Like, you want me to do this for you? You're like, yes, just do it for me.
Right. Do you think that this situation's kind of akin to when computers went from strictly being like a command line interface to having GUIs, where you could click around and drag and drop things? It was no longer like you had to code in what you're trying to do. Like, I'm sure that there were purists, people who were like, oh no, we use like punch cards, and that's how we do things. Like, I don't want to be able to click and drag something. Do you think is the progression similar to that, or is this just like way further into the future?
Um, uh, I think that if this kind of came out back back then in the same realm like of technology, it would be similar. But right now, the possibilities and Microsoft purchasing this thing, Google having its own AI for years now called Lambda, and they haven't done, anything like ChatGPT has. And now they're like, uh-oh, no one's gonna Google things anymore, because I've been
Right.
using this thing instead of Google 9 out of 10 times, and it's 100 times better,
And it
from all
doesn't
my
give you
prep.
right. It doesn't give you bias search results, right? It doesn't, or does it? Based on your history with it, I guess.
I
Because
don't
obviously
it's
Google and
yeah.
other. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. What were you saying about Google and others?
uh, just Google, Bing, whatever. They establish patterns of recognition of the types of results that you might want to see. So does Chat GPT operate in similar fashion, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think generally, yes, I think it does have a bias right now, and I think it's relatively clear. Um, but the way I use it, it's not really anything where bias comes into play. So for Google, for example, if I'm trying to, like, I'll give you just a literal example of what I was doing earlier. I needed to create this Power BI, and I didn't have any experience with it. And there's like some technical stuff and a little bit of code that you do have to write for Power BI in order to uh, present. Well, first of all, are you familiar with Power BI?
Not, I mean, very top level, but not
Okay.
nothing intricate now.
So basically, it is like a data analytics and reporting application. So you connect to a database, and then you essentially do like no code, low code type of thing where you
Mhm.
create this image of the data, and you can like Excel, you do like pivot tables and stuff. It's practically the same thing, except for it's visual, and you can make charts and graphs that are interactive, and you can make relationships with everything. So this it's just like a Microsoft solution to that kind of stuff. And you do have to know what you're doing. You can't just pick this up and just start doing stuff. You can go to YouTube. There's a lot of really great training videos on YouTube, but like if I'm personally like I ran into some stuff where I'm getting an error and I can't create a column, for example. You can Google that, and then what happens with Google is you put in the keywords. Google then searches web pages of people that have similar type stuff than what you wrote. So it kind of tries to match it up. So hopefully you've had the same, somebody has had the same problem and they wrote about it and somebody has answered that
Mm-hmm.
question. Same with YouTube. What ChatGPT
Right.
does is it takes the knowledge and spits out a novel answer. So when I'll go to it, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. This is the error that I'm getting. And it's like the reason why you're getting this error is well, one of three things. You're either using an outdated version of Power BI because this menu moved over here, or blah blah blah. And it gives me
Mm-hmm.
exact answers of what and if that doesn't work, it'll ask me, can you clarify? And I'm like, yeah, what do you need to know? It's like, well, this is what I need to know in order to answer your question. And so I just give it that prompt. And I created this whole Power BI like visual that probably would have taken me weeks perhaps. And I created just like in a couple hours. Like literally, it was just like
Right.
put it together. It was super professional looking. And if you just understand whatever the architecture that you're trying to work on, like if you know some stuff about programming and you're kind of aware of it, you can just
Mm-hmm.
ask this thing to write you, like you were saying, all these lines of code. And so the, the remembering the specific lines of code or remembering where I need to go for this and that, like that's kind of going to be on the back burner, and you're going to be able to kind of just use your knowledge to just interact with whatever you're working with. If that make, I don't know if that
Right.
did I answer your question? Sorry, I had kind of veered off there.
Yeah, honestly, I don't remember exactly what I asked. Maybe just your how you use it, but yeah, absolutely. It's it is definitely pretty spectacular. And I think that we don't even necessarily know the boundaries of it. I heard somebody talking about how well, obviously there's been a lot of I guess like image creation, like it's taking people's faces and putting it on different body, like you can have it do things like that, like hey, take uh
Whoa.
this, and or at least it's somewhere in the AI realm that this is happening, and it looks very convincing, and I think they're like deep fakes or whatever. But I heard somebody talking about how if you are if you're able to give it examples of music that is very popular and that it's popular based on something measurable, like you can quantify to some extent why certain songs are more popular than others, whether it's the key that they're written in or the beats per minute, or there's all of these different elements to just a song, something as simple as a song that makes it very appealing. And obviously, music is something that is very natural to to all of the world. Birds
Mm-hmm.
sing. You know, there's creatures in the sea that make sounds. The way that the wind goes through trees, like we're so uh, overwhelmed by sound all the time. Anyways, um, that the AI will be able to generate something that is so appealing that it could become like a top chart or like a top selling song, or whatever metric that they use to say that this is a popular song now, that in a matter of moments artificial intelligence could do something that's going to be more popular than what anybody else is putting out. And I just think that's so crazy to think about, because at that point like you're, at least for me with music, it's something that appeals to more than just my ears. A lot of music is, it can compel a feeling. It can make you happy. It can make you sad. It can make you like, it can do all of these things. To think that artificial intelligence could have that kind of control over me, is it, like you said, it's kind of creepy. It's wild. And I don't know if
Are
you
you,
thought about it in that capacity, but pretty crazy.
yeah, well, I don't know if I have, but I'm thinking about it now. Well, you
Right,
know what, this kind of, there's going to be a weird juxtaposition between this like mechanical type, like in that sense, that's where an AI would excel. Is it would take all those little cues, whatever, however it touches our emotions and strings. It might not know, but it does know that when you combine these elements together, it produces something more popular. And this is
right,
like Mr. Beast, for example. Like he is like relentlessly looking for a thumbnail for every single video that's going to be the most popular one, and he just
mhm,
sits there every single day, looks at the top 10 YouTube videos, right? And he's like, what
right,
does it look like? What are they doing? What does it sound like? And so he knows what the world wants to digest, and that's why he's the most popular YouTuber. So he's got a weird similar approach to the AI. A flip side is, I'm sure you're familiar with Rick Rubin.
not
If
as
okay,
much as you might think.
he's like one of the most popular. See, I don't even know what he does. I think he's just some dude who helps musicians produce good
Mhm.
stuff, good
Yep,
content. So he's worked with like,
that's my
basic
understanding too.
everybody. He like comes to set, and he goes like in the back, like away from everybody, and just lays down and closes his eyes and doesn't concentrate on the words, doesn't concentrate on the music. He just,
Mhm.
what does this song make me feel? And
Right,
that's,
and
and
that's
through
right, and
that,
that's
yeah.
exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, it is crazy. It's one of those like intangible things where same thing with smell. Like, smell has I believe it's like the most deeply rooted sense in our being, that like smell can um it can take you immediately back to a location, a time, an experience in a way that your other senses can't do. So I hope that AI doesn't have a way to start generating smells, because I mean I guess it can, but man, yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, like the feel of things, and um, that's something that I'm trying to get more in touch with, is like my senses and my emotions and uh, my body, my ability to move and just like feel connected to, um, like I always made fun of Daphne for using the term like grounding, where you're walking around barefoot and stuff like that. And there seems to be some really compelling arguments for like just walking around barefoot. So um, that's like, this is a leap from AI to my senses, but um, well, do you have any thoughts on that kind of stuff? Or are you doing anything physically different than you have in the past?
Wow. Well, first of all, could I just ask, like, and I started to kind of sidestep your question, but when did you start doing this? Is this like a recent thing, and why?
Um, not really. I mean, not really, really recent. For the last year and a half, I'll call it 2 years. Um, I've really tried focusing on becoming more in tune with just the like the input signals that my body was giving me. I had dealt with several different injuries in the military, before the military, after the military, just things, I just kept getting hurt. And it wasn't necessarily anything significant. I hurt my shoulder pretty bad when I was in the military, but apart from that, it was just like I was always feeling, you know, increasingly sore, or, you know, tired, all of these things. And around the same time is when I really started tuning into people like Andrew Huberman, and the like the body or biohacking, like do this for a month and see if you feel a difference. Like whether it's waking up and delaying your caffeine intake for 90 minutes because your cortisol levels are so high when you first wake up, like postponing that type of thing, or intentional dopamine deprivation, like where you don't give in to you want to do something, so you decide not to do it, so that your body
Ah,
isn't like, you're not getting that instant gratification.
yeah.
And there's a ton of there's a there's a big movement in that space on YouTube and elsewhere, and a lot of it's come to light through the Joe Rogan podcast and podcasts like that, where there's these people who have legitimate like biological hacks, biomechanical hacks that mainstream media doesn't approve of, so it doesn't gain any traction. I mean, vitamin D, like all of
Yep.
these things. So it really started. We'll just say early 2020 when the thing was really a big deal. So um, that's when I just really started to take an inward look and say, like, why are these things happening? I'm young, I'm healthy, I'm strong. Why am I sore, or why am I not sleeping? I was like a pretty significant insomniac. I was taking Benadryl every night to sleep, and it didn't add up. And it's just been making these incremental life changes, and then now I'm getting into like the more extreme things like grounding and trying to limit exposure to certain things. Like I understand, and I'm logical enough to know that I can't, by not microwaving my food in plastic containers, like that's a small step, but at least it's a step, right? We can't eliminate the microplastics that we're taking into our bodies because they're in every water source on the planet. But I can at least not microwave my food in Tupperware. Like I just have flashbacks to microwaving ramen noodles in Tupperware in that kitchen at Second CEB for like 14 minutes trying to get the stupid thing to boil. Like I can't even imagine the kinds of toxins that I took into my body then. So just trying to make really intentional moves to be what I'm considering healthier, or what I feel is healthier. So
Yeah.
it's been
No.
about.
Couple years. Sorry to interrupt. It's been a
I was
few
just gonna
years. You
say,
said.
yeah, it's been about a couple of years. Yeah.
Well, that's a long time for something like that because obviously you're aware just the additive effects of doing something as a routine. It just stacks over time. So you not microwaving your food might be a small step, but you doing that every day plus all the other stuff you're doing is, I think it's can give you amazing results. And yes, now that you like kind of went through like all this kind of little stuff that you do, I've also been kind of on that path. Like I've been listening to Dr. Rhonda Patrick for a long time about her
Oh yeah.
sauna stuff. I do
Yeah.
daily
Heat,
saunas
heat
now.
shock proteins. I remember. I think we even talked about
Yep.
heat shock proteins way back then. 2017 or whatever that was, 2018. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, and Peter Attia, he does
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I love Peter Attia because he's just I don't know, just I like listening to him talk. Like he's not eccentric at all, but he just sits there and he's just able to flow from thought to thought so seamlessly, connecting all this stuff. Like the dude's a true scientist, and I love all his stuff on longevity and his stuff on like I watched a clip of him like the other day
Does
actually. So yeah,
does he talk about the telomeres? Is that him? Um,
telomere, probably. I've never heard him talk
yeah,
about telomeres. Rhonda Patrick does.
okay, that maybe that's where I first
Yeah,
heard it, but
yeah. The
yeah,
the, the
what's your
telomere is like the length. Yeah, yeah.
right? Yeah, and that they shorten over time, and so like there's kind of an idea that death is a disease and it's preventable. And I don't know what that looks like exactly. I know that like you said, Peter Tia. There's several people in that space that are really convinced that there's definitely more that we could do towards longevity. And I don't necessarily want to live forever. I can say pretty certainly that I don't want to live forever, but my goal is to live the most abundant and thriving life that I can now, and feel the best that I can every day. And I just wasn't there, and it didn't make sense. And just doing these different things, the the early morning sunlight, like it sounds so cliche because it's so clickbaity and it's on every reel that you watch, like the delayed caffeine, the getting sunlight in your eyes, not watching TV before, like all of these things. It sounds so minor, and it's so easy to roll your eyes at, but once you start to put it into practice and you realize that you haven't been at nearly, you probably haven't even been at 70%. Once you start to realize that, it's really hard to go back. It's like when you go on a clean diet
Oh yeah.
and then you're road tripping or something, so you stop and get some fast food, and you legitimately pay for it. People were making fun of me because, like, I'd be like, no, I can't eat that pizza, like it'll tear me up if I eat that. Like, oh, shut up. And then I'd eat it and I'd feel terrible. So no more giving into to peer pressure. It's legit.
Okay, so that's like, so we talked about like telomeres and all this other stuff, but diet, right? That's probably like up there with like one of the most important things you could possibly do. And obviously, it's obvious, but I think that like what you really need to focus on is what you touched is eliminating certain foods, and it's going to be different for
Mhm.
everybody. There's definitely people
Right.
out there who can eat a pizza all the time and it's totally fine. There's just their
Hmm.
body takes that fat, takes that carbs, it processes it fine. It doesn't make him react. Uh, I get messed up too. Like I pay for
Yeah.
it hard. If I eat some pizza, if I do this, I'll start getting zits. I'll start like I feel like crap for like days. It's not just like, oh, that evening or something, my stomach hurts. It's actually not. It's like very subtle. It's like I'll notice it over time. It's like degrading,
Hmm.
yeah, like my joints and all this weird stuff. And then I eat clean for like a few days, and I'm like, I feel so good. I feel
Right.
so
Like
good.
I'm back. Yeah. I so like I really do enjoy food, and I enjoy the experience and the fellowship and there's just the whole environment of what comes with food. I'm from a pretty big family. I'm an extrovert. I like to be around people. Food brings people together. So it was hard for me to make the transition from just thinking of food as, fun and tasty, but to change gears and be like, okay, food is fuel. And I need to fuel my body correctly if I want to feel right. And so I still enjoy food, but I do put a much, much higher emphasis on the importance of getting the macronutrients that I'm shooting for, getting, like you said, the I guess you didn't say exactly, but the right kinds of fats, the right kinds of cholesterol, the right kinds of protein, the right kinds of carbohydrates, the things that I know my body breaks down well. And diet is even diet. I mean, I guess it's kind of obvious, but it can be a pretty polarizing subject because you have the like vegans and vegetarians, and then now it's become a lot more common to hear the terms like carnivore or animal based, things like
Hmm.
that thrown around. And I don't think that either one is 100% right for anybody. Like it's one is not the right answer for everybody is what I'm getting at.
Hmm.
And are you familiar with Dr. Joel Saladino, the carnivore MD, is his tag?
I'm familiar with him, but I actually don't know anything about him.
Right. So he's another incredibly, incredibly, incredibly intelligent man. Um, and he does this. It's pretty much like a live study that he's doing on himself this whole time. He originally was a completely plant-based guy, and he was having all sorts of issues. His blood work was all out of whack, and then I don't know exactly what his transition to being completely carnivore looked like, but he went to where he just ate meat, primarily grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And that's all he ate. I don't know what the timeline was, but he was starting to have some issues after a long time. like your body does a process. It's called gluconeogenesis, where it's taking proteins and it's turning it pretty much into sugars for your body to burn off as fuel. So even though he wasn't consuming carbohydrates, he still had glucose in his system. And um, anyways, he was starting to have like joint pains, fatigue, all this other stuff. So he started incorporating fruit into his diet. So now he eats meat, fruit, and honey pretty much. But the point is, like, um, people just write him off as he's just the eat meat guy. But as you can see, if you actually pay any attention to him, he admitted, like, hey, this wasn't working for me. My blood work was out of whack again. I felt like I had brain fog, joint pain, fatigue, whatever, and started incorporating these carbohydrates in. And he's one of the guys that has done a lot of study and education to the defense chemicals um, that certain vegetables put off, which is a whole interesting topic of its own. Like that the plant can change its biology to defend itself against a predator in the area, whether it's a bird or a bug. It's crazy how that works.
Yeah, like I mean, this is relatively old, but like I was reading about how when a plant, I think it might have been like cabbage or something, when it hears the sound of another of its kin being eaten, it'll I forget what it does. It like reacts to it in a certain way. Like it might like retract or release some sort of chemical or something. It
Mhm.
has a reaction to that specifically whenever it's eaten, which is crazy because yeah, that opens up the possibility to me. It's like, okay, what other forms of communications is sort of happening? That
But I
reminds
mean,
me of no,
go
no,
ahead.
sorry, no,
Sorry.
you go ahead. I was gonna veer off a tangent on mycelium, and I think that we should just
No,
stick to
that's
this.
exactly what I was going to say.
Oh,
Mycelium.
no
So
way.
it's like the
Yes,
mesh network in the forest, right? It's
amazing.
incredible. And
Could you just explain what it is? Just a brief
so
overview.
yeah, I mean, to my understanding, it's essentially a network, and though it's all, I believe it's all root based, right? Where there's some kind of electrical, pulses or somehow, tree A is getting chopped down, and tree B over here on the other side of the forest knows about it, and is making adjustments accordingly. Probably it's crazy that these plants have the ability to communicate in a way that I don't know when it was first discovered that this was even happening, but it's just wild. And you probably have a better breakdown of what it is if you can go into depth a little bit more.
Yeah, I could try. I mean, most of my knowledge is from Paul Stamets. Are you familiar with him?
That's where I heard
He-
it too.
yeah, he's just I think so. I believe he's a mycologist, but he's like I think what's interesting about him is like he's not like officially a mycologist. Like he didn't go through like school and do. He just loved mushrooms, and he had a transformative experience with magic mushrooms when he was like 16 to cure his lisp, his not lisp but stutter. Sorry, he had a debilitating stutter from like birth, and he couldn't look people in the eye, and he couldn't finish a sentence, and so until he was 16, and he took some magic mushrooms, went to a forest, and there was like this giant thunderstorm. He climbed up on top of a tree, and he just kept saying he will stop stuttering like for hours, for like 4 or 5 hours straight. And then at the end of that experience, he like walked up to this neighbor that he's known his whole life, like looked her right in the eye and said, "How are you doing?" And then she was like, "What the fuck?" And then his stutter entirely cured it. But
Wow.
that dude, so he's super into mushrooms, obviously, because it like that kind of thing, I suppose, just drew him into the field. But what I know about mycelium through like just listening to him, watching him, is it's exactly what you said. It's a network of like essentially like your brain, like neurons,
Hmm.
but it's like a mycelium network. And yeah, it passes electricity. It also passes. Um, it attaches itself to everything in the forest. So when
Hmm.
you were saying tree A, say it has an offspring, like way down in the forest, and tree B is the offspring. It's like the mama to or the baby. It'll pass the carbon and nutrients through the mycelium
Right.
network to its baby, and it'll prioritize its kin. And all the trees and everything, all the plants are connected at the root level, and they all like just communicate with each other all the time, passing stuff next to
Yeah,
each other.
it's remarkable. And like, I don't know about you, but I ask myself, or I ask the question of why more these days than I used to be more prone to asking the question of how. Um, and how is really it's answered by quantifiable metrics. It's answered by science a lot of times. The how is answered by science, but to find the why, you have to start looking elsewhere. Whether that's your like you're talking about magic mushrooms here, or DMT, or just looking for answers founded in religion, or whatever your belief is. And when I think about something like this, like, why was there a network for these plants to talk to each other? Is it just to keep the kin of one plant alive, like you're saying, how the nutrients can be passed, or what's the purpose here? How much data is being transferred from one generation of tree to the next? Like, do they remember the ice age? Do they remember the floods? Do they remember, like, it's really remarkable to think about, like, how old is that network, or how old is that connection to the earth? It's really, really incredible. And you know the record keeping in trees is not as tainted as our record keeping. If you think about, like, 100-year-old tree, and you cut it down and you can count the rings, you can see the years that it was fed well, and then you can see the years of famine, you can see when it encountered damage, and you can see all of these things, this record of this huge amount of time. And then you look at us, and we just die and we don't pass anything on. Like, dude, trees are awesome. They're incredible.
There, you should have been a like an evolutionary biologist. You would have, if you're this fascinated by this. Are you familiar with Brett Weinstein?
Yeah.
Oh man,
Brett and his brother.
uh, okay. I don't even want to go into Eric. Do you see this poster here? Not poster.
Oh my
It's
gosh, I do.
literally
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so the story behind this is I went to print out his portal, his podcast. It's called The Portal.
Mm-hmm.
Just his little, I guess, logo is what you say. It's his name. He's got a bunch of like equations and graphics,
Yeah,
and
I see
then
that.
my printer at that moment ran out of ink, so I was like, just smeared this thing, and it's not fully in the, you know, in the shot here, but basically,
Yes, I see
it looked kind of cool, and I was like, that's interesting. And you know what? Here, I'm gonna lower it just to
Yeah.
1 sec.
I like it. Looks like it says Rick Weinstein.
It does say Rick because the dimensions are that's a nail, so I'm not gonna do I'm not gonna
Okay.
I forgot that I nailed it in. But by the way, I hate like I'm so scattered sometimes with my thoughts, but I have to put this out there. Have you seen that Joe Rogan has a new Eric Weinstein episode?
I did. I haven't watched it yet, but I heard. So I haven't listened to a Rogan in a long time, actually. Just
Mhm.
because, and it's nothing against the podcast. I was an avid listener. I think I've probably listened to over 1,000 episodes. And yeah, I
Holy
think
God,
there's what, like, close to 2,000
1900.
episodes, I
Yep.
think. Yeah,
Mhm.
so
Wow. I want to say wow.
avid listener. But anything that becomes that consuming, I think, can start to, it has a diminishing return. And I had to just kind of step away from it for a little while. But my brother-in-law texted me and was like, hey, this is the one that should bring you back. And he sent it to me. So I'm definitely going to tune in and listen to it, because I love listening to him.
If you do, I would love to have a debrief with you about that episode.
Yeah.
So this whole journey of like having a podcast, and really what it is like content creation, I suppose, in a way.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to channel the strengths that I have, my personality, maybe communication skills, and analytics about whatever, in order to create something. And I don't really know where this journey is going or what I'm doing with it, but I just love podcasts like you do. I've listened to countless of them, and I've always wanted to be one. No one's inviting me, so I started my own type of deal. That's kind of what happened. But to get back to the Eric Weinstein thing, I thought about a new thing that I wanted to do, and that is to do like, and I'm gonna coin the name right now, total deconstruction of that episode, because it is like it reminds me of the Bible, and I don't mean because of the meaning that it portrays. What I mean
Mhm.
is, I
That
sat
episode
there.
reminds you of the Bible?
Yes, yeah. The way that episode is structured reminds me of the Bible, and the way that it does is I was taking notes. I sat there. Okay, if I want to do some sort of debrief or content creation, I need to understand what he was talking about. And every time Eric said anything really about through the duration, there is so much compacted into this.
Hmm.
It's so dense, sentence by sentence. I had to keep pausing it. I only watched an hour. I have like 10-page of notes, and I think it would take me months to go through all the different stuff. And that's why it reminds me of the Bible, because you take, things like, I'm not super familiar with the Bible, but from my understanding, if you take things like the Sermon on the Mount, well, good luck. There's so much packed into that, so much meaning,
Right.
so much crazy stuff. That's what this kind of reminds me of. And so I want to kind of just like, okay, I got what he was saying. I understood the conversation, but like, did I really understand it? I just listened
Right.
to it while I was like working out, doing the dishes, doing
Yeah.
stuff. And so I wanted to do this total deconstruction. So once you watch it, like, please, like, give me a call or something. I would love to just,
I
first of
will.
all, debrief. I'd love to get your initial
Right.
thoughts. But yeah, it might be one of the most important conversations that I think I've ever heard in my life. And I really don't, I'm not throwing that around just as a, you know,
No, I definitely understand where you're coming from when you say that. And there's a lot of figures like that for me, that I hear, whether it's just the way that they communicate or the message that they communicate, because sometimes um, somebody with a really important message just doesn't deliver it well and it loses me, or I have a hard time understanding, what's behind the message. But he's one of those individuals that he can talk about really high level things in a way that, like you said, you could just hear this and be working out. You could just listen to it and you'd be like, wow, that's really good. Forgot what it was about. So that's pretty cool that you're taking this like really, really broken up approach to listening to it. And I've tried to do that with some of the other people on there. But I, dude, my attention span is horrendous. And especially when it comes to like taking notes and stuff like that. ChatGPT was created for people like me.
yeah, agreed. I've never like, I've probably got the case of ADHD like a motherfucker. Like I
I'm
very,
there with
very,
you, man.
I can't do any of that stuff typically. But when I noticed that when I attached it to this, like, okay, what if I do content with it? What if I go
Right.
through this and then create a video and talk through it and be like, this is that 3 sentences that he just said, looked at this insane history and things
Hmm.
that he packaged into here. And you don't actually understand it unless you know who all those people he named, because he just rambles off a bunch of people's names. He
Right.
rambles off like, XYZ, and it's all cohesive. And he does an incredible job of saying things that nobody understands, but making you kind of
Hmm.
understand the gist of it. Uh,
Right.
but so now I have a mission. I have a goal, and my goal is to create the. So it like turned a thing in me to where I am able to
Hmm.
sit down, listen to it, and take down notes, because I'm in a completely different zone in my head,
Right.
and it was
Different
a very
space.
weird. It was a very weird shift, because I don't think I'd ever be able to do this without some sort of, oh, I'm doing this for a purpose. Like if it was like a
Right.
school assignment, I'd be annoyed at it. I'd be like, oh, I just want to get this
Hmm.
done. But this is for me. This is truly, genuinely something that I think I would just love to do. Uh, so yeah, it's a weird little lens that I was able to stumble across.
That's, I mean, that's really cool. I think that what you're describing is passion. I don't think that it's that confusing as to why it could take you from a position of like breezing by it and being, scatterbrained to like hyper focused on it, because that's kind of the other side of our attention span, or our attention. They call it a deficit, but not exactly a deficit. Just it's whenever it's something that I'm passionate about, I can really hone into it. But actually, this first, you were gonna say something about Brett, his brother, before we went
Yes,
into Eric,
thank
and
you.
then you said, "Don't get me started on Eric." And then remind me, I want to go back to attention spans after this.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for reeling me back in, dude. You're, you know, you're the captain now of this podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I love that. Brett Weinstein. Holy God. Do you know, just before I kind of get into the evolutionary biology thing that we were talking about, are you aware with his situation and how he got effed over in his field when he came to a certain discovery, which has to do with telomere length, actually?
um, yes, kind of. I remember a conversation about it, and I know that he had like his what he has like a truth group website type thing. I can't think of what his website is, but it talked about a lot of that stuff.
Okay. Would you
So
like to
his
go over that, or do you want to go back to the evolutionary biology thing? Because again, I'm veering off a tangent here.
either way, I mean, I think that it just go in whichever direction you were intending to go. I'm not
Okay.
as familiar as you are. I'm kind of familiar based on discoveries that he made about there, and input from people in his circle about certain events going on in the world, and how that was very much not appreciated by mainstream anything.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll save that for later. And if at a later point you're curious, like what happened in his youth when he was going through his PhD program, and how whatever that backstory, I think I'm relatively familiar with it, so I could probably off the top of my head kind of talk about it. But I would only say all of that to show how incredible of a scientist he is, and how
Yeah.
much I respect his work. Um, but I think what I was trying to say earlier about the evolutionary biology thing is you have what I heard as passion when you're talking about
Oh
how
yeah.
why the how, and so it just reminded me of him. Uh, I,
Mm.
I don't even know, honestly. I don't know how I was gonna plug him in anymore because we went off that weird tangent.
Yeah, we did.
But
We went sideways, man. It's
my
good.
bad. I derailed it. But I
No,
can
it's good.
let me try to salvage this by coming back to this mycelium thing.
Yeah.
So, and you were kind of asking, like, how long has this been around? Like, why is it there? Why is there this
Right.
network? Um, so I think they've been around. I think there was like they're hundreds of millions of years, or maybe even billions of years. So there's like fossilized like mushrooms or something that are
Mm.
just older than the dinosaurs, and they've been around
Yeah.
forever. And so when you take them out, the amount of evolution that it took, and there's all these incredible apocalyptic events like asteroids, periodically
Hmm.
hitting the Earth, particularly the one that killed off the dinosaurs like 65
Right.
million years ago. When that happened, the entire atmosphere of the world changed. There was no sunlight for a very, very long time. There's like debris everywhere. And mycelium thrived, mushrooms thrived, and that's anybody that essentially partnered up with mycelium was able to survive. And what I mean by that is mushrooms are grown out of mycelium because the mycelium like senses and just whatever knows what kind of mushroom should go here and there because it attracts certain predators, it attracts certain things, they eat it. or the spores fly, and it's like an ecosystem, but it's like controlling, it's like the orchestrator of all this thing. And so if you
Mhm.
got with it, if you got with the mycelium network and the mushrooms, you were able to survive and have food and all this other stuff, while all the
Mhm.
dinosaurs and everyone big, they needed all these nutrients, they just didn't have the capabilities. um, but if I was to ask you, and I don't know your position on any of this really, but like, talk to me about evolution. What, I guess, what do you think about it? What do you think the origin of life is?
Mhm.
Um, and why do you think we have this insane process of getting bigger, better, faster, stronger, or more intelligent as far as we can look back?
Yeah, super interesting topic. I think that, first I should establish that I'm a creationist. I do believe that there's an immovable mover and that something didn't come from nothing. So I definitely, I believe that we were that this was all created. Um, Now, where that takes a where things get confusing is when, there's been this young Earth theory that's been shoved down our throats for such a long time that, at least in Christianity and other religions, where it's like, hey, like, we've not been around for that long and the Earth's not that old. And then, it doesn't it doesn't take long looking at things like Ubekli Tepe and like all of these different things where you're like, there's no way, one, that this just happened 2,000 years ago, and two, that they did that with, you know just some hand tools and like nothing else. Like the things, my whole concept of the order of how this all happened has been drastically brought into question. Just because of people like Graham Hancock and um, the findings that they're discovering and able to carbon date, and the fact that even contemporary curriculums of history are so wrong in so many ways, and the like the societal norm is to keep the wrong information there because like they're that terrified to be wrong. So, I like I said, one, believe that we were created, for a purpose, and that we didn't just evolve from nothing. And two, I do believe that evolution is happening all around us all the time. It's you can't deny the fact that if you live in certain parts of the world, in the southern hemisphere, you have more pigment in your skin because you would be sunburned to death, if you were put into those elements, or that you might be hairier, if you're in a cold climate. Like there's too many, just, and those are like really top level things. Like, there's much more intricate differences between not just humans but all species, and dependent on where you are in the world. So I think that, like you said, bigger, better, faster, stronger, or whatever you said. I don't know why we're evolving in that direction, because I do think that we are still headed into like a superior state. Like we're evolving into something bigger, better, faster, stronger. We're evolving into something better, but we're also evolving into a position where it's probably not going to be necessary for that much longer to be stronger or to be robust or to, you know, to maybe even reproduce. And that's where it gets really interesting. Is like, what does the future of humanity look like if we don't even need to like tune into our humanity anymore, if we don't need to fulfill the sexual desires or urges, if we don't feel the need to reproduce, like those are the foundational elements of how humanity has thrived. So are we evolving ourselves out of that? What do you think about that? I know that's kind of a theory that's kind of thrown around.
Yeah. Are we evolving out of that? Maybe if I could backtrack and sort of wedge in my position into this,
Yeah,
it might
absolutely,
explain
please.
this answer a little better. Um, First of all, wouldn't doubt if we were created. That no red flags for me at all. If somebody says life was created and got to Earth, however, the way we got to Earth, I will question that, and that's a red flag. Like, you don't know, just don't say, just say we don't know, and that's fine with me. That we
Hmm.
got created, yeah, wouldn't doubt it. And the reason why is I think evolution, much like you, does have a purpose. It does have an intelligence to it. Um, and like, I don't think it's as simple as stopping with Darwin and being like, yep, evolution happens because you're bigger, because you're faster, because you're more adaptive, and because you're able to survive. That is condition number one. Condition number one to survival is you have to be able to survive, and that's it. And if you don't
Right.
survive, well, it is what it is, but something else will survive. And
Hmm.
when you take into context, we've been around for like 3.5 billion years, we meaning life, and all the
Hmm.
crazy shit that's happened. And we're like in this human body where you can't even see the atmosphere because we don't need to see it, right? The air, the
Right.
oxygen, the nitrogen that's in the atmosphere right now. It's like all around us, and we're able to use it not only to fuel our bodies, right? We have all our senses, so we have all these insane waves of light and radio waves of all different frequencies and within our scope of visual, I guess, whatever, within our visual scope and outside. But it's just this giant mess of all these waves and fields just everywhere. And then we're learning how to just thrive better. And then the question is, it's like, okay, where, like, why? We can't say for sure, but I can certainly say, if I were to put, all my chips on one side of the table, it would be that there is 100% a purpose, and I don't know what that purpose is or whatever, but it would be very convenient if somebody did create us. Because if
Right.
someone created us, there would be almost logically like, okay, well, why? Why would somebody
Right.
create us,
Well,
right?
you're alluding to the same thing that I was earlier. Like I'm less interested in how at this point and much more interested in why. So it's kind of interesting that we haven't talked in really
Yeah.
years and we're thinking along the same wavelength. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then like the way, like if I was to again put my money to, or like, okay, what's your best guess at this moment? I would say life. Oh man, I'm gonna try to be so careful with this because I have never said this out loud, so I have just
Mhm.
kind of like fragments of it. Maybe I'm trying to pull together and form something
I
cohesive
get it.
here.
Yeah.
Life is, wouldn't doubt, and probably most likely in my dumb, uneducated brain about physics, about I don't really know that much about any of this, but if there was some sort of way that, like, I'm imagining an entity needed for whatever reason or wanted for whatever reason to package a process and place it somewhere so that process is able to take shape and form over X amount of time. And whatever this process is, it was really not worried about how long it's going to take, in my opinion. Because if you're looking at 3.5 billion years of evolution on Earth, it means this thing's super patient. It's willing to go the distance. Wouldn't doubt if we're not the only ones either, because having one life form on Earth, we will be eradicated at the very least when the sun expands and engulfs the Earth, right? That's the least of our problems because that's
Mhm.
going to take another, you know, like maybe 1.5 billion years. So if something
Maybe.
did, right, if something did create us, they're probably, unless we're like far, like we're like in some weird rat maze where we're being observed for whatever purpose, uh which is another thing actually, that's very possible as well. And I think they go over
Like
that in the Eric
simulation
Weinstein.
theory stuff.
No, not simulation theory. Just imagine you are a scientist looking at a mouse just doing its thing, or looking at an anthill. It has no
Hmm.
idea what you're doing. It doesn't understand that you're perceiving it and taking notes
Right.
and doing whatever. Like, that's not outside the realm of possibility that we're being observed. Um, and so that's a thing. Or maybe there was a dying civilization that is like, uh-oh, we are stuck, whether it's due to the laws of physics, whether it's due to them knowing too much about physics and they just did some
Hmm.
crazy irreversible shit, and they're like, how can we recreate whatever life is, or how can we package this up
Right.
into a process and just send it off in order for it to be able to thrive and exist. So I'm gonna stop there. Like, what do you think about any of that? Because those are two kind of things that are within my sphere of possibilities, along with some other ones.
Right. And like you, I also, you know, I question the possibility that it's just us, that it's, this is it. Because even if you do, um, root your foundation of truth in something like the Bible, or whatever book of religion that you know use kind of as a compass to guide your way through life. Um, me being me in the way that I think, I'm like, well, okay, so I'll subscribe to this. There's a God. This is the word. This is the instruction that's given to me. But what if that's it? This is the instruction given to us. What if there's another set of instructions for somebody else? What if and you can like really spiral out of control getting into that kind of thought. Like, okay, this is Earth One Bible. What about Earth Two? Like, um, yeah. So I totally get it. And then you have people like breaking down the simulation theory stuff. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson, I'm not sure, but said that it's more probable that we are in a simulation than that we aren't. So like mathematically speaking. So it's like, man, these odds really aren't looking good for me, just thinking that I'm just, a guy here in South Central Pennsylvania hanging out. Like, I'm a total fraud. This is all a video game. Like, what's going on? um, so it's kind of it's overwhelming, to say the least. I mean, I remember the first time that, and this is kind of off on a tangent, but the like very simply, the wave particle theory was explained to me. And it's like, so you're telling me that all of these waves, all of these transmissions are flying around us, and they're not there until they're perceived, until they're picked up by something. Then once we know that they're there, even though they were there the whole time. It's like, how much are we missing in this, in the capacity that we have to perceive these things, like you were saying with the waves. And it's like, man, how much more is going on right here simultaneously that we can't see? And what would it look like if we could? It'd be so cool.
Yeah, I mean, that it would be too much to probably see unless we. I guess that's why we have technology, right? To perceive all this weird stuff,
Right.
and it's like that kind of thing is like, you kind of sound like a junior physicist. You're like, why the? Because like physics, like it's like a hardcore science, like or math or whatever you want to picture. But like to me, it's like actually you're just like, what the hell is this shit? What is this all about? How
Mm-hmm.
how do we like? What's the fundamentals here? Like, how do we get here? It's like the most, probably the most fundamental thing you can do as a human is try to learn about how, why, about the,
Right.
about the realm. um and oh man, I lost track. What was I was like, sorry, I got in my
No,
you're
just
painting an image in my head, and I was in that world.
well, yeah, I'm
Um,
painting an image in my own head, which makes it really difficult to talk sometimes. But like, it brings into, it brings to my mind, just in keeping with like spirituality and other dimensions, mushrooms, like all of these things. There's and even the was it mycelium? Like these, there's such a intricate design, and that to me points to a creator. And the fact that if gravity shifts in one direction or the other such a slight amount, that we would be dead, that we would overheat or we would explode. It's like these things just, the intentionality of it is like, if you look back at the Great Pyramids, it's like, this is too perfect to be a coincidence. It's too perfect to have been, however many mile long ramp they calculated that it would have to be for those, the big marble pillars to have been, put over like the King's Chamber or whatever. I think it was like 1,000 miles long or something, for them to have had to be able to roll it up to reach the pyramid for the big chamber. It's like, no, we just don't know what technology they had. There's talk if they were able to. I think, I mean, there's all sorts of theories, that have come out about how they got things up there, whether it's manipulating gravity or, frequency stuff. Like it's just incredible. So all that to say, I'm just using the pyramids as an example. It's too perfect. This equation, that we're living in, is too perfect for me just to write it up to a puddle of mud, turn it into this. And I'm okay with not knowing how. I'm really just, I'd like to know why. And I think that, to the best of our ability, just sitting here and talking about it is part of the why. Maybe God is just a really creative guy that wants to watch us try and figure it out. Like, I don't know.
Perhaps,
Super
yeah. I
cool
mean,
dude.
to touch on that simulation point, for whatever reason, like I used to kind of entertain it, but now I'm just so not. I don't know if it's bored, but like I recoil
Mhm.
almost now because it's like, okay, cool, yeah, we're simulated, but it's pretty sweet. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I can love my kids, I can love my wife, I can pet my dog, and this is
I
not
saw
bad. Whatever
some.
it is, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, exactly. It's like, okay, if this is a simulation, I mean, it kind of goes back to, if this is creation, um, kudos. You did a bang up job. This is sweet. Like, I am
Nux.
able to experience the full gamut. Like, this is awesome. So, killer job, creator.
Yeah. And, I don't necessarily think that humans have to be the end all be all and the bee's knees or whatever, because we could have not have been. For my, personal understanding, we could have very, very easily just, first of all, not evolved into this because the dinosaurs never got extinct and they would have just roamed the earth, and there's just so much more oxygen in the air that things were just giant and massive, right back like hundreds of millions of years ago. And then also there were human-like creatures like Neanderthals and uh,
Yeah,
the
I'm like a pretty
Australopithecus.
close descendant of a
Yeah,
Neanderthal.
I am too. I got some pretty good amount of Neanderthal. I did that 23andMe thing, so
Yeah,
I'm right there with you. But
I was like,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I think our regions kind of crossed, because I was like
Yep.
strongly Ashkenazi Jew. So
I was 0.9% Ashkenazi Jew.
yeah,
That,
see that
yeah,
there's some crossover.
yeah. We share probably a common ancestor. Back in the day, my ancestor, your ancestor, just were chilling, over a fire. Like, what's going on, And
Yeah.
that's again like a very primitive way to think, because you know you're talking about the pyramids, and dude, that's its own thing, right? I mean, I'm very deep into Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, the
Hmm.
frequency stuff, all this stuff as well. So I could, you know, we could talk for hours just on that subject and how
Right.
amazing the architecture was, and how they're like, honestly, at this point, I would say it's very likely there was a civilization from the ice age that was extremely advanced that did things that we have no idea how they did. And that's okay to say. It should be okay to say,
Hmm.
hey, I'm not going to tell you what they did, but we don't know how they did it. Or rather, I'm not going to tell you how they did the things they did, because we just don't know. And that should
Right.
be, and that's actually amazing. If you don't know, fantastic. Let's go find out. That's, you don't know anything about physics or math or anything else until you know, find out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is incredible, and I'm sure you've seen Ancient Apocalypse, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
did you read Is it Fingerprints of the Gods, or
I did not read it, but
um,
I'm aware of the book. Yeah, Fingerprints of the
okay.
Gods.
Either way, it's pretty highlighted, but in Ancient Apocalypse, it's so interesting, the serpent stuff, because if
Yep.
you do think about what a comet looks like, and like you see this reoccurring theme in every region covered in that series across the world, that there's this recurring theme of the sky and comet, or I mean the sky and snakes, um
The floods.
and then yeah, floods, and how each religion had their own breakdown of what it was, whether it was a punishment or whatever. Just it's so interesting. And going back to mushrooms, like my knowledge of mushrooms is really limited, and no experience, but I've heard people talking. What is the like the mushroom that we all think about when we think of like a red mushroom? What's that
Pe-
called?
Amanita muscaria.
Yeah. So,
It's on my
oh
hat.
yeah, exactly, right there. That's perfect. How there's you could take somebody with no knowledge of really anything, give them this mushroom, and they could have a very similar experience to somebody who's been exposed to cartoons and things like that, like how there's like a common theme of the little people, and like the colors and the dancing, and um all of these things that point to like, that's how could a substance cause like this creative interpretation to be the same or similar in so many in everybody's brains, everybody that partakes in it. So it just all really points to like a connection between me, you, and the rest of the world. And like it sounds, it's such a hippie like way of thinking or way of talking, but I just wish that people could get back to like that place, like, hey, we are the same. And like this chemical affects us pretty dang similarly, or this experience calls this kind of emotion out of all of us. It's like there's just so much hate and discontent in the world right now, and it's a really big bummer, man. It bums me out big time.
Yeah, we haven't figured that out, right? And probably never did, honestly. There might have been some pockets somewhere. Yeah, as far as you know, the history that we are aware of, America has probably been the closest thing to what you're talking about, to this like,
Hmm.
okay, let's chill out. Maybe not anymore, but you know what I mean. The concept of
Right.
America, that's probably the closest we've ever gone to. Um, but okay, the common experiences you're talking about, the most compelling thing for me is DMT. No experience with that either, but I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of studies where the people not only experience the same stuff, but they experience it at the same time. So,
Right.
they're all do DMT in a group, and they come out and they're like, oh yeah, I met this entity. It's like, oh yeah, what was this name? And then they're like, oh, the exact same thing happened to me, and it's a shared experience. That to me is like, whoa. It's like, what am I supposed to think of that? That's just, it's like, okay, like it's like
Well,
almost too
and
much.
yeah, and also to think that um, that your body secretes the what is it, dimethyltryptamine.
Dimethyltryptamine, yeah.
It it produces that chemical in near death or death experiences. Um,
Yep.
it like it's that's just way too. That's not a coincidence, and it's so incredible, and the therapies that they're doing with these, um, psilocybin and um, all of these compounds. It's really incredible how much deeper it can, you know, how much more in tune with yourself, your experience. Like it's really really incredible the potential that it has, and um, the fact that, like you're saying, these you're going to like another dimension together somehow. Or I heard a story. Uh, have you ever heard Ari Shafir's story about when he did salvia and he was there for like, I think it was like a month or something, and it was like
Yeah.
this 10-minute trip. So it's like he was there, he had like a family, a wife, kids, like loved it, and he like came out of this trip, and it had been, I don't remember how long he said it. It was either like a matter of months or a matter of years, but he was like, he fully believed that he had lived all that time in this trip. And it's like, man, that's incredible. It's
Yeah.
just, it's crazy.
That needs to be way more seriously taken and rigorously studied so that we can have in all these smart, incredible people, well funded and
Mm-hmm.
producing amazing research. Like Terrence McKenna, for example. Like, man, just listen to that guy talk. Holy God, he's so deep and intellectual, and he committed his entire life essentially to psychedelics and experiences.
Yeah.
And he talked about it in such a deep rooted way. Like, we need to give that guy more, or that, like, people like that. We need to give him some money. Here you go. Here's some fucking psychedelic compounds. Do what you need to do, but please, could you just teach us about what the experiences are, and take that kind
Right.
of stuff way more seriously, because psychedelics have been a part of human civilization as long as we have history. There has been, like, the ancient Egyptians used this thing called the blue lotus, I believe, blue lotus
Mm-hmm.
leaf or something like that. They drank
Yep.
it all the time and had psychedelic experiences. The Romans and the Greeks, they went to Eleusis, which is like a city that or like I don't know if it's a city or a place that they went, and they all just basically trip balls on all these psychedelic stuff, and like everybody went there, and like all the leaders and like the emperors and all this stuff, they went there yearly, had a bunch of incredible experiences, came back, and then changed the way they ruled stuff. They're like, hey, I had this
Right.
vision, and this is the way we're gonna do stuff. So like this kind of psychedelic experience is like intertwined into how we got here, our history, our modern history.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's definitely not something we should be overlooking. And you were talking earlier about how grounding and all this other stuff, how you're trying to get
Yeah.
closer to that. In Ancient Apocalypse, I think it might have been Göbekli Tepe. It might have been one of the other temples, but it was like obviously all of them are like astronomically aligned to like the summer
Mm-hmm.
solstice or like some sort of constellation. But what really struck me was like they were describing the scene to where the temple is in such a way that when the sun rises, it pierces through every single corridor and lights everything up at the same time. So it's like if you in your village or whatever are just chilling there in the temple and the sunrise
Right.
happens, you're all simultaneously just experience this you know the sun. I don't know, like it must have been just such a spiritual ritualistic thing that they put at the center of the civilization. It's like, hey, don't forget this, the sun, stars, everything else. Like, we need to. This is like the place we live. So like, don't
Right.
be like loopy and going through life and like, oh, I gotta get some food. And it's like, no, no, no. Pay
Mm-hmm.
attention. Like, this is insane. We don't know what's going on, but you need to
Right.
you need to relish
No,
this.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that in today's society, like we're we're taking in so much man-made input, um, that it's really really easy to neglect the just how incredible of a place we live. I mean, I know you just recently went camping somewhere like pretty remote, right?
Yeah, yeah. Eastern
Eh,
Washington is gorgeous.
Where and there's probably no light pollution or very limited light pollution. And when you look up at the sky in those conditions, I mean, um, I don't know if it's just because I've become like more just a more sensitive human as I've gotten older, but like um, it's like awe striking. And whether it's looking up at the sky where there's no light pollution, you can legitimately see the Milky Way like with your eye, or it's looking up at a mountain. Like the first time that I saw the Rockies, it's like something in me is just marveled by it, just blown away by the magnitude of these things. And like the the feeling of awe feels really really akin to like fear almost. It's like an overwhelming amount of feeling. It's an overwhelming amount of input is coming in. So like if if people could just get somewhere dark enough to see the sky, like I think that it would change things. It could change things for people. If you could just get back in tune with things, and psychedelics might be a shortcut there for some people. It's not the route that I've gone, but you know, just if people could get to a position where they can start to feel again, yeah, like just like light pollution makes it hard to see the sky. I think that all of the input that we're receiving from computer screens, and obviously that's how I make my living is with a screen, but um, just to become more cognizant of the the amazing things that are around us, I think it would do everybody a lot of good, and maybe you find that through psychedelics.
Right. And you don't. It's like you were saying. Like you don't need to find it through psychedelics, but there is this piece of that awe, that fear, that whatever. That's a wave top of emotion, and emotion
Right.
is what you kind of need to do cool shit. Like you're
Yeah.
not. Try. Like it's like the difference between like America and like China or like Soviet Union is like you're probably going to be more innovative in a place where you're free to express yourself and truly
Hmm.
care. Like, oh, I'd love to study this. I'm going to be whatever, a geologist. Instead of being put through a process where you're like, hey, you got to do this, do that, and that dulls down your emotions, it dulls down your senses, and you're more
Right.
in a different kind of state. So like it is what it is with the light pollution. Like we're not going back, that's for sure. And
Hmm.
so I think finding those ways, or like making camping or something like, hey, like a mandatory
Right.
like work like vacation, like hey, for a
Yeah.
week, you got to go somewhere and experience something real. This was like kind of touched on slightly in the Eric Weinstein podcast actually.
Oh
Joe
yeah.
and Eric both had the same sort of consensus that like yeah, like whatever is happening to the world, they didn't go into like why, but they made the analogy that a normal everyday person is essentially on ketamine. They're
Yeah.
like they have no real
Absolutely.
tangible like touch with the reality. And the way they came up, or came up on that subject was because Eric was describing his father during the Cuban Missile Crisis, going from town to town because he was traveling, and every single person in every single coffee shop or restaurant, they were intimately aware of everything that
Hmm.
was happening geopolitically. They're like, "Yep, we got some shit going on in Cuba." They felt it. It was like this camaraderie, this like network of like we're on the same page here. This is a big deal. And then he compared that to an article that he read, which, whether or not this story is corroborated or true, it read Russian missile veers off course and strikes and kills two Polish citizens. And he's like, and he said, in any other time where you have a NATO member, which have his citizens blown up by a missile of a country, that is a declaration of war, essentially, right? Or if it's not a declaration of war, rather it is ground for like everybody should shut the fuck up, get on the same page, and give a fuck about this thing. Whether or not that story is true, it's like, hey, let's check in on that. Like, what is intelligence saying? What are the reports saying? Because we have hydrogen bombs right now. It's, we're beyond the stuff that we dropped on Japan. Like right now, we have total destructive power, but like there was none of that. Nobody, like, it was just an article that probably faded into the background of 1,000 other things that people consume. And so this sort of ketamine-like experience, I think, is like what you're talking about. But that's extrapolated not only for like big scenarios that everyone should care about, but for everything,
Right.
for everything else. And so like, what do you think is like, there probably is more than one route, but like, what is some of the stuff that's like, you feel is making people like this nowadays?
That's a great question. And there's, I think that there's a lot of things. Obviously there's a lot of things, and some of the ones just really, really close to the top, I think, are this incredibly fast-paced, uh, like reels and shorts, like the really, really fast-paced videos. You take in a ton of information really, really quickly, and then you like immediately scroll to the next one, scroll to the next one, scroll to the next one. You stay on this one longer, so the next one's kind of like that one. And like so, the just how quickly information's at our fingertips, I think, is one of them. Um, a a not a rule, a practice that I've been doing more and more lately is, if I'm asked a question, about somebody or something that I do know, like it's in there somewhere, but I can't recall it right then. Like I'm really hesitant to just go and Google it. And if it's not like something that's really pressing, I do my best to recall it, or to, do everything that I can to like get this memory back. Because I don't know about you, but I found that in the quick, like the fast paced entertainment, that I feel like I'm losing some of that recall that I used to have, like where I could like pull things out of my head. I've lost a lot of that mental acuity. So I think that that's one of them. I think that just, in the same space is, these immediate gratifications like pornography, and um, the normalization of over sexualization, and doing these things to meet these urges that we all have. It's made us, as a whole, it's made people lazier, less willing to pursue hard things, less willing to seek out a mate, and go through that whole process, because that takes time. Whereas you could get that same chemical response in 15 seconds on a web page, whatever it is. So I think that like those are just two examples, in the same space. They're both entertainment based, and I think that that's a huge thing. I also think that, taking this back to biology and diets, like we're shoving a ton of chemicals into our bodies, and we are legitimately, like you said, ketamine, but we're actually sedating ourselves. We're actually doing these things. Um, and so much of it is just, and there's legitimate chemical imbalances that can benefit from being, given a therapeutic drug of some sort. But like, I'm really, really stressed out right now. Like, I'm so anxious. Yeah, you have every reason to be. Look at what you're going through, man. Like, if we could just talk to people, if we could just love people and care for people, maybe we wouldn't be in this like catatonic state that we are in. People are so, like you were saying, we've become so desensitized to normal input from others and from our own selves that we're becoming disconnected you know from feeling, and it's super unfortunate. And um like Eric was saying there, it took this crisis to bring people together. Then a lot of times you hear people talk about September 12th in a similar light, where it's like, oh, we were united, we stood, we were all one, we were all facing the same thing. It's like it shouldn't take a crisis to bring people to that cohesive environment, but for some reason it does. And I think that there's probably a long history of that. It's probably the way that it's always been. Um, but I feel like we're better than that. We don't have to, it doesn't have to be that. Um, I don't know. What do you think? Why do you think we've ended up here in this, like you said, some people are just zombies walking around, and they're angry. People are angry.
Yeah, no, I've what you just said about the angry zombies walking around. I've
Yeah.
experienced that recently, and it's very scary because it's like, oh, this is right here in my backyard. This is people I care about. This is people that are, my friends or perhaps even family. Um, and yeah, it's a, you know, thanks for throwing it back at me, man. After you gave such a thorough answer, but like what you said, plus because you're right, it's a million things. And by the way, just before I get into that real quick, I think it's going to take a bigger and bigger tragic event or, big event for humanity to get aligned, because
Right.
September of 2002 is a different world entirely with a lot less
Mhm.
sedation happening. So, they've upped the tranquilizer on us. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't mean they as in like there's like a group, but we've upped our own dose. We're like, all right, let's just crank
Yeah.
this up.
What's in this water?
Um,
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
it's ketamine.
Oh, microplastics. That's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
um, uh, Let me answer that with something very personal.
Yeah.
This is one of the aspects, one of the elements. I noticed myself giving a lot of my presence, my conscious, whatever, my life to my virtualized existence. So what I mean by that is anytime I'm playing games or scrolling on my phone or looking at social media, XYZ even if it's a short period of time, that is that much time that I'm not producing something, that I'm not caring about something, that I'm not stopping to smell the roses, that I'm not
Mhm.
noticing my kid doing something amazing and cute because it just takes a fraction of a second to miss
Right.
it. And that virtualization needs to be very, very tightly controlled.
Hmm.
You have to have a plan. You cannot dive into whatever the hell's going on, or
Right.
else you're gonna fall victim to it, like I believe that I am right now. And I'm digging like I've noticed it. I'm like, oh, I'm falling to this same. Okay, let's figure this out. So like, uh, I forgot my phone the other day when I went to the bathroom, and I had an amazing idea about something, and that ended up spiraling into something super super productive. And I was like, whoa. Instead, I usually like scroll through something or play chess. So that's like one of my other things. But it's like those things are very good. However, and I thought of myself as an observer watching my life, and I'm just sitting there like for like hours. Like I would
Hmm.
if I was watching this, I'd be like, like what is it? Like go like
Right.
move. I'd be poking myself with a stick. Like you're just sitting there. Like imagine an ancestor of ours, right? Who toughened out the freaking ice age, had to fight some mammoths or some saber-tooth tigers, and then they're like, oh okay, at least I did good in passing on my genes and whatnot. And they see me being an asshole on my couch, just not moving for 3 hours. I
Right.
played Rocket League the other day till 3 in the morning, and I was like, "What just happened, dude?" I started playing this at like 10. I was like, 5 hours later, I was like, "Oh my god!" And I was like, I'm putting that controller down." And so I have to reel myself in, but I'm putting, like, I'm trying to have a game plan now. I'm putting all this together because it's like that is just sapping my time, energy, and it's good when like this. Well, I have cameras, I have lights, I have this, that, but I feel like this is the right way to do it. Right. So I'm doing
Yeah.
something productive for a purpose. There's a mission. I'm connecting with you as a friend that I haven't talked to. There's that human element. There's that
Mhm.
passion, because all the topics we discussed is like, oh man, like I could literally talk about this like all day. So it's like,
Yeah,
uh,
me
you
too.
know, it's a good stuff, but and then I should turn it off and put it away, and then go spend time with the family. Go look at my dog. You throw them a bone or whatever it is
Right.
to reclaim my physical presence a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is it's so easy to just let life slip by. Um, it's it's really crazy. I mean, I don't know about you, but you're on kid two. But with baby number one, we just had our, well, she's almost a year. She turns one next week, which is crazy. But um,
Wow.
yeah, having our first baby, our daughter, dude, it puts so much into perspective for me. It answered questions. It gave me revelations about shortcomings that I had as a husband, as a friend, as a son myself, as a brother. It highlighted things um, that I didn't realize before being a dad, and um, it's been it's sparked a massive growth in me as a human, which is awesome in its own right. But like you were saying with the phone, something that I've noticed recently, and I'm not on my phone too much. I don't play games or anything, but I definitely get caught in the scroll cycle and YouTube or whatever. I actually deleted social media when we came home from the hospital when she was born. Like I was like, I'm not wasting time there. Um, but what I've been noticing is that she's standing up on things. She's like starting to balance. She's about to walk. She speed crawls everywhere. She can get into anything in a second. But like if I am looking at my phone, and we've been really we've been like a no screen time family so far. Anybody's choice to do that, but we're just not doing screens at the moment. But if I am scrolling my phone and she's doing something, like she'll kind of look up at me, and when she sees that I'm not looking back at her, it's like, you know, I can almost feel the like disappointment that I wasn't watching whatever she was doing. And I was like, man, like I don't know what you just did, but clearly I missed it and I don't want to miss it. So like I'm just trying to, just centralize and be so intentional with my time because um, just just like you, I've got a lot to offer, and I don't want to waste it on a scroll. And the platforms are so addicting, and they are so fulfilling for a short period of time, but they're also incredibly addictive. It's crazy how if I'm not thinking about it, I could pick my phone up 5 times probably in the matter of 5 minutes without a notification, without anything. It's crazy how you walk to, let's say you're like waiting in line to get into an elevator. It's been like 30 seconds and everybody's on their phones. It's brutal. Like nobody's talking to each other. Nobody's, asking you how your day's going. Like that's a wild one. I've been super intentional about just asking people how their days are going. And at the checkout line, when you're on a walk, when you're on a run, when you're whatever you're doing, just, hey, are you doing okay today? And it's been kind of remarkable the amount of people that have said no, like they're not doing okay. And then like getting into that a little bit, you know, if you show interest in people, it's pretty remarkable what can happen for you. And I think that's my, you know, that's my biggest advice for life right now is, you know, take interest in people because that's what really matters. I'm you know, super interested in people. I love people, and I want to be the best person that I can be. So I'm gonna, you know, start with the person in the grocery store.
Wow, that's something, you know, that I think, I don't know if it took me a while, but like I'm certainly nowhere near you are with the my personal connection, and I think that's, it kind of happened. Like I don't think this was my choice to sort of be like reclusive for people, like not really like socially awkward in a sense, like where I'm not always seeking, like I don't need to do that, like kind of
Hmm.
social interaction. I think it's mostly because I had a big family where I grew up, and that was my, you know, day to day. I was all the time just immersed in my family and my friends.
Right.
And then when I moved here, it got severed. Like I have my mom and my sister was the only humans that I was, you know, uh, had shared the same blood or shared the same history, or you know, it's not like I could relate to anybody. They're like, oh, did you move from Moldova? No. Okay, well, I
Yeah.
don't know how to just discuss the life that I had until I was 10 years old because it's so different. And so think I became more reclusive, and I wasted so much of my time playing like RuneScape and like stupid shit. Like
Hmm.
it's not stupid. Like I definitely don't regret the times, but like I got virtualized like as a young kid, and I do think that's completely debilitated big parts of my life that I'm trying to recover now. So I think it's a amazing thing that you're able to delete your social media, put your phone down, and be super intentional when it comes to your kid. And you know, we haven't even talked about like fatherhood and stuff, and that's something that now we're like brothers in arms type of thing when it comes to being
Yeah.
dads, and that's a whole different thing. Like I remember the last time we, you know, had a conversation was don't know how this happened, but I was in my backyard and we got on a phone call together, and Daphne was pregnant, and
Hmm.
and was something that Nicole pointed out is like I was just talking about myself, didn't even ask any questions. So my bad if you noticed that. If you didn't, well, I just brought it up.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm so mad.
but yeah, I think I was like trying to like make some sort of point of like you have no idea what this is gonna do. It's like there's nothing I can
Hmm.
say because your journey's gonna be different. I'm not saying you know that you're gonna experience fatherhood the same as me, and the changes that I experience you'll experience. However, what I can tell you is that it's just it's gonna blow you away what kind of person you are now versus a year from now.
Hmm.
I think I hopefully said that during that conversation. If not, I
Oh,
might have
you
at some
did.
point. He did.
I
Okay.
do. Yeah, absolutely. I think you even said something to the tune of like, it's gonna make a better man out of you, or something along those lines. Um, and dude, you know, it's uh, it's been a remarkable experience. I mean, it's been crazy how quickly it's come. Like this first year is gone by, um, but it's really really amazing just the perspective shifts that I've had in my personal, like in every area of my life, and I can pretty much point to the fact that it changed when I became a dad. And um, yeah, dude, it's incredible. Being being a dad, being that Superman is super. It's an awesome honor to be a dad. I mean, it's awesome. I I feel like I've said awesome like 15 times, but it's just it's one of those experiences that you really can't describe um, in the entirety. It's an honor. It's a pleasure. It's also terrifying. It's adventurous. It's you know, it's just it's a full spectrum of emotions packaged into one experience.
Yeah.
and it's humbling for sure. You know, the sleepless nights in the beginning, or like when you're coming up to these different mile markers, whether it's teething or crawling or walking or like getting an attitude. Like I didn't realize that came so early, but it does. Being picky about like all of the things that happen. It really makes you reflect back on your your beginnings, or at least for me, it's like,
Oh
man,
yeah.
the probably the most significant thing, I'm blessed to have parents that have loved and cared for me since the day that I was born. I don't take that for granted at all. But to realize, like, the amount of love that I have for our daughter, my parents have had for me, and to think that I could have ever been, you know, rude and inconsiderate of their feelings, and like just things like that. It's like, man, when you get older, you're like, wow, I was a total ass when I was younger. It's like
Yes.
seeing it from the other side is like they loved me so much anyways, and it's so cool. It's just really fun. It's also just really fun to see them learn. I mean, she is so smart. Even just so young, she was mimicking sounds and doing things. Obviously, I think she's like spectacular, but
Yeah, yeah.
just like seeing her take this input and reproduce it is so cool.
Amazing. And what you said about like thinking of your childhood, I think that's like a something that not a lot of people touch on. It's like, yes, you can get focused on the kid and how insanely transformative it is, and you can't even put words to it because first of all, you're a year into this, right? So
Hmm.
you would you would have to, and that's your Bible in a sense. And what I mean by that is you would have to write an entire book in order to
Hmm.
describe, like, the reason why you said awesome 15 times is because there's probably no words that you know of that could describe this. You'd have to literally try to formulate analogies and stories and metaphors to even go over the first few months, right? I mean, it's
Right.
just absolutely incredible. And then I had the same thing where I was like, holy God, like, and then I was like, what was I like? And I was like, started asking my mom because, like, perhaps unlike you, I had a more like distant parental presence.
Hmm.
Like my parents divorced when I was 3. My dad lived in a different country, so I was raised without a father, and I'm always like, oh man, like I'm teaching them so much stuff, and there's so much stuff that my wife is teaching them in a completely different way because she's her own, like, this gentle, nurturing, like the prototypical like female, and that's really good stuff. And then I have at least try to have this masculine because again, I was raised by my mom, so it's like a little
Right.
difficult to fall into that masculine role. But like I try to fill that in, and we balance each other so well
Hmm.
that I'm like, oh man, like, and I'd ask my mom like, hey, like who taught me this, or like did anybody teach me this, like
Right.
how did I get to be the way that I am, right? And then you sort of have, I don't know if you've had these experiences where you're like, oh, I just had a core memory, and I was like a very young, and you did what to me? I was like, I could never imagine. And I'm not talking about my
Yeah.
mom or anything, but like and another adult
Right.
human, like how could you possibly do that to a to a baby? Like I
Right.
have some memories from like 5 and 6, and just some really effed up things happened, and I've always like, whatever, yeah, I'm sure it's not. Never even thought about them as trauma. And then I
Right.
think I'm like, if this happened to my child, this would obliterate them. But they would have to deal
Right.
with it, and they'd have to grow and get over it and be traumatized and probably suppress it if they didn't have an outlet. I don't know if you had, similar sort of revelations.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily in respect to like childhood traumas, but definitely, even in more recent years, just the overwhelming amount of stressors that I've encountered, just in this last year alone. I mean, we moved with a 3-month old twice, and then I've started 3 new jobs in the last 8 months.
Oh
Um,
God.
we sold a house in the crazy market, and we bought a house in an even crazier market. Like, I took one of those like life stressor tests. Like it pretty much takes input from the life events that you've encountered and gives you a score and tells you like what your stress level is at. And I think you want to be like below, I think it's like 200 or something. And I was at like 476, and it was like seek counseling. Like it told me, it was like, you've experienced too much this year. Um, and just being like, wow, yeah. So sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, but yeah, it's changed the way that I interface with people. Like you were saying, you know, you're probably like a personality type introvert, and I'm extroverted, but um, I just I heard Joe Rogan explain something at one point where he was talking about how once he had kids, whenever somebody was being a jerk or whatever, he would just see them as babies and be like, "You're just a baby," and something went wrong somewhere along the way. And like I heard the analogy and it made sense, but you know, having a baby and being like you know, it's so I don't know if you encountered this kind of thing, but there was a lot of sleepless nights early on, and I was doing everything that I could to support Daphne, my wife, while she was, you know, nursing or taking care of like these long nights. I didn't feel like she should do it alone. So even though I was working and everything, I would try to gut my way through them. But um, there were some nights where you're like, you know, half asleep and taking care of this baby and just nothing's helping. They're just screaming in your ear, and you like start to get frustrated, and you're like, you know, what what am I not doing for you? And then I came across this post, and it was like, your newborn is not manipulating you. Like, babies aren't manipulative. That's not what's going on here. They just only have one way of communicating, and that's to communicate everything, whether it's a stomach ache or I'm hungry. And so taking that same kind of mindset, you know, your newborn's not manipulating you, and applying that to people with just really poor communication skills. Like, this person's not just rude. They don't know how to voice what is going on with them. So like, even with the rudest of people, like I can be I could be a pretty combative personality, strong personality. But more and more, the older that I get, the more and more that I try to just level with people, even when they're being rude or they're being inconsiderate, they're being like hard to deal with. It's like, okay, I understand you're frustrated, you know, and you're frustrated with yourself because you don't even know how to communicate what you're feeling here. So instead of like berating them, I've just become more patient with them. It's been way more beneficial and helped me progress much better professionally.
I empathize with that a lot. I think I've always, I don't, yeah, I'm not gonna go into detail into how like I perceive people and whatnot, but I've always had this in just a very strong, perhaps, sense of like kinship with anybody. So like I'd be friends with the weirdest people, the craziest people. Like I don't know how you perceive me, you know, like as a social person or whatever, but like I really did see through like, you know, people like Matos or whatever. When people got mad at him, like I always like thought of that kind of stuff. I've always been like, well,
Oh yeah,
like you know, guys, like the way that he's perceiving this or the way somebody's trying to communicate this thing is like
right.
it just doesn't jive with whatever you're trying to experience. And so being frustrated or angry or yelling at someone you know, I just never did that. I wasn't the type of person. And even when I got into leadership positions like corporal sergeant, I never just sat there and grilled somebody because like I just always had this sense of like, okay, like I was able to kind of map it out. And then
Mm-hmm.
after having kids, it just became so much like that feeling just grew and grew and grew. And now I'm
Right.
like, whenever I see a situation when someone's being a dick or a jerk or whatever it is, I'm like, man, what must have happened for you to become like this? And it's always, the answer is always like just suffering. Bad things happen to this person. There, or or if it's not bad things, the opposite of that is being a spoiled person, right? That's that's the
Right.
opposite side of, that's equally as bad as being a jerk, as being somebody who's given everything, doesn't appreciate anything, doesn't have. And so there's like this sweet spot in the middle that hopefully most people can get into, to where they're like pleasant people to be around. But
Hmm.
anything on the extremes, it's like, yeah, that's what happened, because this person got fucked over. They got fucked over.
Right.
Nobody's born naturally, other than like, probably 1% of people naturally psychopathic, right? Like a
Hmm.
normal human being, even if they're a little neurodivergent or whatever, like, dude, they just went through some shit, and we should cut
Right.
people some slack.
Absolutely. And the another pretty fundamental idea to go along with that is that everybody has their own threshold for suffering. So if your 10 and my 10 can look very different, but that doesn't change the implications of that experience. And so just leveling with people. I was always in the same boat as you. Maybe we approached it a little bit differently, but uh, I love the outcasts. I don't necessarily see myself as one. I do pretty well to just fit right into the mix of things, but I'll tell you what, like the weirdos, that's where I'm drawn, is just hanging out with the people that everybody else is casting aside. And that's just my personality type. I just enjoy, there's such a depth of there's such a deep well in those kinds of people. And you know, sometimes like the the better fruit comes from those relationships. Sometimes that's where the juice is. That's where the song is. My brother-in-law said something to me the other day, uh, and it was along the lines of, even a bird caught in thorn bushes produces the sweetest sound. And basically what he was saying was that, like, because I was going through some things, and he was pretty much alluding to the fact that even though I was in this position of like pretty intense trial, that I could still, you know produce something beautiful out of that pain, that kind of thing. And I thought that was like a really, really good representation of, hurting people. There's still something there if you just give them a chance. And so that's really cool. I love that, that you are in that same, you know, field of thinking when it comes to this, the Mattises of the world.
Dude, I talked to that guy probably more than anybody else, right? But perhaps along with you. I Those people are absolutely fascinating to me, because that's a territory just not explored. Like, nobody gives them the
Hmm.
social time of day. Like, people just be jerks to them. And that really, like, literally pissed me off, and that broke my heart whenever I saw that. I'm like, cuz like especially people that are just so, like, almost innocent, like that either very innocent sometimes. But yeah, they can do
Hmm.
stupid shit. Yeah, they can, misbehave in certain ways, but like, uh, I don't know. Like, I've really had a strong aversion to people using their, like, yeah, you can form a coherent sentence and you can do your job well, but it doesn't mean you have to be a jerk to somebody.
Right.
There's just ways around stuff. Like, you can, like, if, what is your purpose here? If your purpose, like, say we're at the shop, right, at Ola's six shop, and we're trying to get something accomplished. Well, you're not like, the fastest, the least friction way to get something accomplished is actually to be kind of nice and understanding, and understanding people's downfalls and their strengths and weaknesses.
Hmm.
Like, if you're judging, person A, who might not be the same as most other people, by the same metrics as you're using to judge everybody else. It's like, you're just not, you're it's like almost, there's like no excuse, because you're just in this environment every single day with this person. Get to know them, get
Right.
to understand them. Like, and I know that's not, I don't think that's very typical, like the way you and I probably attract
Right.
ourselves towards that. Not very typical at all, and that kind of stuff really sucks. And yeah, honestly, I don't even know where I was going with that, but I just
Yeah,
remember those times.
yeah, absolutely. I think that, two things to take away from that are, one, uh, at least the direction that that organization was in at the time, um, it was never going to work out for us. It just wasn't. We could have been, potentially great leaders, but it just that they're just it's just numbers to them, or at least to the majority of them.
Yeah.
Um, and two, I think that I don't really remember what I was going to say for the second thought, but just, it's not the most efficient way to, deal with people. It's not like efficient or comfortable to legitimately care about their thoughts or their feelings, or that person's, sensitivities. Like, that's not super convenient to do. But as somebody that cares about people, it's not about convenience. It's about doing what I feel led to do, and that's what I'm always going to default to. Even now, having been put in a couple like team lead type positions, I the reason that I can successfully lead teams is that I understand the potentials of every person put under my charge and where they're going to thrive, because of taking that time to learn about them. Um, and there's all sorts of great leaders out there. Simon Sinek, are you very familiar with him?
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, you know, I believe, yeah. What? No, it wasn't him. Well, anyway, Simon Sinek, Jocko Willink, yeah, all of these guys,
Hmm.
even Joe Rogan, he's at least platformed a lot of people that, they're strong, really strong individuals that are showing a different way of leadership than maybe a lot of people were used to, and I think that's really cool.
Like Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard, exactly.
I remember she was on his show and she was just saying that when she was a Democrat, because she's recently left the Democratic Party actually and started her
She
own
was
podcast.
kicked out.
She no she left because she wouldn't play. Well, she was kicked out in a sense of like she was never going to accomplish anything for sure.
Well, yeah, I
But
think
like,
Hillary was like, get her out of here.
she's a Russian asset. But
Yeah.
one of the core things I remember about Tulsi was like she brought like Hawaiian rolls, I think, to for everybody, the Republicans and the
Hmm.
Democrats, and then she's like aloha, and there's like just greeting everybody, and I was like, that's a leader right there. Like she's gonna
Right.
know every single person. Um, but hey, man, listen, it's late here, and it's even later for you. We've
Yeah.
talked for it's coming up for a bit over 2 hours, so and I have bedtime routine to do with the little ones.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, thank you so much for I really enjoyed the hell out of this conversation with you. I had
Yeah,
such a
this
good time.
this this is great. Let me so the quote that I was thinking of, that I'd like
Okay, yeah,
brainboarded,
yeah.
was Simon Sinek, and it's along the lines, and this is probably not perfect, but that good leaders don't look for recognition, they look for others to recognize. And so that's the way that I'm trying to, in these positions of leadership, carry myself, is that it's not about me, it's about the success of the team as a whole. So that was that quote. That one stuck with me, even though I couldn't remember it. That's what it was. So,
No, that's beautiful.
but
That's I think that's a good point to end it.
yeah, man, this was a pleasure. It's great talking to you, brother.